Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have a couple of games to discuss. So we are going to break down Alabama's massive win in Rupp Arena that happened yesterday. That was by a score of 102-97. So we're going to talk about that, about what went well, what still needs to be cleaned up, and then we will break down Vanderbilt. It's going to be coming to Tuscaloosa on Tuesday at 6 o'clock. They just actually got a big win against Tennessee in their last game, so we'll talk about that one, and then we will get out of here. So as I mentioned, we're going to start the episode talking about the Kentucky win. Alabama goes to Rupp Arena and gets a big win, 102-97. This game was absolutely electric start to finish. This was a very, very good offensive game. If you were in for offense, in for modern basketball, that's exactly what you had in this one. Honestly, this game was very similar to as I expected. I thought that Alabama was going to come out with much more fire than they had, obviously, after the loss to Ole Miss. I thought that the team was going to be ready to play on the road. This year, they've done a really good job going on the road. The only loss they had was that Purdue game on the road, and I thought that just in general, this season when they've gone on the road, there's been a fight and a grit to the team. And so I thought that they would have a really good chance. That ends up coming to fruition. I think also Alabama just let the game come to them and did not let certain foul calls or certain things affect them quite as much as Kentucky maybe did in this game. There were some foul calls on both sides that were controversial, but I obviously don't think it was the difference in the game. I think that it may have impacted the game slightly, but I don't think that it was the only thing that was the difference in this game. I do think overall that this was a fairly clean back and forth game that for the most part, the officials kind of let them go. Alabama was taking a little bit more physicality to Kentucky and kind of forcing the officials to make the call. And at times in this game, there were a lot of calls being made. I know Nate at times was upset about some rebounding calls that were made, but by and large, I don't think the officials were the difference in this game. I know some Kentucky fans may feel differently, but I do think that this came down to a situation where Alabama hit some timely shots, especially, the game's tied 81-81. Alabama hit some big threes. They have a big three by Chris Youngblood. LeBaron Philon hits a big three. And just overall, there were some really, really big shots that were hit in crunch time, as well as some big free throws that Alabama hit that has not been the case over the course of the season, right? It was talked about on the broadcast, but Alabama for the season is at 70.8% from the free throw line. In this game, they actually go 29 of 34 for 85%. So Alabama does a really good job not only getting to the line, but also hitting the free throws when they did get there. Largely, that was due to Grant Nelson, Mark Sears, 8 of 9, 9 of 10. Both of those guys did really well. Nate mentioned in the postgame that apparently Grant was upset with himself about how poorly he had shot in the Ole Miss game and went 90 of 100, and then 91 of 100. In back-to-back days in practice. So this was something that Grant was working on and trying to make sure that he didn't cause us problems from the line, and it definitely showed, right? His stroke from the line looked really good, and Grant was locked in from the word go in this game. In the first half of this game, Grant was really the big part of Alabama's offense. Grant has 19 points at the half and really felt like he was able to kind of assert his will. At times, Mark Pope would put in like Travis Perry to try to just have an extra body due to some fouls that Andrew Carr and Jackson Robinson, some foul trouble they were in. And Perry was really being taken advantage of by everybody, but I know there were a couple of times where Grant was able to get the switch, and, Grant was able to take advantage of that. Grant also, we know how Grant likes to drive to the hoop and drive physical, as somebody who's been playing a lot of college basketball, and force the official to make the call. And I think that at times in this game, he was able to kind of assert his will and play with the physicality that we know Grant can do, and be successful in this game. He did hit a couple of threes. He took some that I don't, love to see Grant take, but he had hit the first couple. He airballed one and then hit the next two, and so I think he had some confidence about him for the next shots. You don't love to see the 7 attempts from Grant, but you can live with it. It's not the worst thing in the world. Some other guys that I thought that just played fully within themselves. Cliff Amori, I thought this is one of Cliff's best games in Crimson. he just really was a force down low. He gets a couple of blocks. He does a pretty good job on the glass, finishes with 7 rebounds. He was a really good lob target, really good at fighting around the rim. In general, I will say the front court played a great game. Another guy who just was phenomenal in this game was Mohamed Diabate. He ends up winning the Hard Hat Award, even though he only played 15 minutes. Mo D in those 15 minutes has 8 rebounds, 3 assists, has a steal, does end up fouling out. Some of those were like tough rebounding fouls. You don't hate those. If they call them, they call them. But it really felt like Mo D did some things, and especially in that stretch we were talking about at the 81 point, Mo D ends up keeping a couple of balls alive that end up, one of them gets passed out to Chris Youngblood that he hits for a 3, and the second one he keeps inbounds and gets passed over to LeBaron Philon to hit the 3 to go up 9 on that 9-0 run, right? So there were just a couple of moments that it really felt like Mo came up big in those moments, either getting a rebound, getting to the line. He got to the line, had 7 free throws in this game that he attempted. He goes 4 of 7 from the line. You'd like to see that be a little better, but overall, not the end of the world. And just in general, Mohamed Diabate played a really, really big game, was really big at multiple moments in this game, both on defense and on what he was able to do, on the rebounding side of the ball. The other guy that I will say that played a really good game, and it's really what you hope to see out of him kind of moving forward, is Chris Youngblood. I thought that Chris played a great game, plays 24 minutes, ends up with, it looks like 10 points, 1 of 1 from 2, 2 of 3 from the 3-point line, 2 of 2 from the line, right? Chris Youngblood hit the couple of threes that he got, was able to play big defense, and, with his stature, was able to be tough on Otego Owe, on Lamont Butler. He was able to, be able to match the physicality with some of those guys. And I thought that Chris just really played fully within himself and was able to hit the shots that were timely, right? It wasn't about him hitting 10 threes, right? He only hit 2, but he hit the threes when you needed them, and they were threes that were fully within rhythm. They were fully, within the offense, and it really helped us get to that point. Another guy that you have to talk about is LeBaron Philon, right? When we talk about Philon, he was my player to watch. If you read the pregame threads that I put out on Twitter, he was my player to watch. And the thing with LeBaron is that really surprised me is he apparently has worked on his 3-point shot a good bit. Nate had made some comments about after the Ole Miss game, if you want to be a good shooter, you got to put in the work. You got to do this and that. And apparently LeBaron had been working a good bit, and he goes 3 of 5 from 3, right? This is one of LeBaron's best 3-point shooting nights. Again, this is not somebody that Chris Youngblood on the other side, you do expect to be a good shooter. He's been a career very good 3-point shooter. But LeBaron Philon this season has not been the best 3-point shooter. He's been really good at getting to the hole, finishing around the rim and such. But LeBaron has not been a 3-point shooter. And he hit some really timely threes in this game. None bigger than the one that puts you up 90-81. But I know he hit a couple of corner threes, and this was just a really, really good game out of LeBaron. I thought that on the road he's done a great job this season, playing within himself and not letting the moment get too big. We thought that he had a little bit of a slump in those first couple of games in SEC play, but to be able to bounce back on the road in Rupp Arena, have 15 points, 4 assists, to play at the level that he did, I thought that it was just really, really good to see. And then obviously Mark Sears, 24 points, has just an incredible game, 9 assists just to 1 turnover. I thought that he was able to facilitate the offense. I thought that he was able to, he was not the best 3-point shooter at times in this game, but he, again, was able to hit those timely threes when we needed them most. And I thought that that's what mattered, right? Maybe not his best shooting performance ever, but was able to finish with 24 points, hits 4 threes, 8 of 9 from the line, 9 assists, right? You really got to like what you saw out of Mark Sears. I thought that overall, I thought that he was able to facilitate the offense, and I thought that overall, he was obviously a spark in this game. He had to be a little careful as it relates to, he only ended up with 1 turnover, but dribbling around Lamont Butler and Otego Owe, some of the better defenders, you just have to be careful because Kentucky is not known as a team that's going to turn you over a lot, but they do have some good individual defenders like Lamont Butler that can definitely cause some problems. The thing for me that I would look at in this game that I think was the most important thing if you're looking to the next games was how well Alabama was able to take the counterpunch, right? To start the game, Alabama goes on actually a pretty big run, or Kentucky starts up a little bit. Alabama goes on a run, and it really felt like, okay, maybe Alabama's going to find the offense, and Alabama's going to keep Kentucky at arm's reach. But then at certain moments in this game, Kentucky's able to fight back, and this is just a really well-coached team. Credit to Mark Pope. This is a completely different team than it was under Calipari. This is a much more modern offense. This is a much tougher out. Just a really good coach. And I thought that at times, and especially like the under 12 timeout, Kentucky really gave Alabama a huge, effort and a huge, push that I thought that Kentucky was going to be able to flip the script, right? Alabama's up. Otega Owe gets a steal off an inbound, or we inbound the ball. Grant goes to throw it up. We get a steal, and then he scores that point. They end up getting a charge call on Grant. You get a couple of momentum plays there in a row, and it really felt like the momentum had completely shifted in Kentucky's favor. But credit to Alabama, they were able to withstand that, put up, hey, we need to fight for the rebounds. We got to do what it takes to be able to get the momentum back, get a couple of big shots, get to the line, hit some free throws, hit a three, and kind of take the crowd out of it, right? And that's what I thought was the most important thing that Alabama did in this game is that at moments Kentucky really felt like they were fighting back and were not rolling over. And at times you've seen Alabama and any other team where they have a team at arm's length, then that team is able to come back, and it's really hard to keep putting a team away time and time and time again. You then let the team that came back take the lead, and when they take the lead, they never relinquish it. And it really felt like the thing that Alabama did the best in this game is even though they were on the road, even though they were in a hostile place to play, even though Kentucky was hitting some big shots, they were able to kind of keep them at arm's length, sit down, defend as well as they could, play within themselves, not try to do too much, and then inevitably come out with the win, right? Get the offense back moving, come out with the win, and at the end of the day, you win this game by 5 in Rupp Arena. Were you up by a little bit more? Sure. I thought Kentucky did a good job. They hit a couple of threes near the end, kept putting you at the line that makes the score be what it is. But I thought that overall, credit to Kentucky. This is a really good team. That was a really tough place to play. I thought that Alabama was able to do just enough to win this game, but I think that it definitely could have gone the other way, right? So I think that the matchup in Coleman Coliseum is going to be another really good one. I think that both of these teams match up very well against each other, so I would be, very curious to see what kind of things Mark Pope is going to have ready for next time around. Alabama did not have Darion Reed in this game. It's the last thing I will mention. Alabama did not have Darion Reed in this game. I am not sure if he will be playing in the Vanderbilt game or not. I know if you watched my preview, I was under the expectation maybe he was sitting for Ole Miss with the expectation he was going to be playing for Kentucky. It sounds like he, is still progressing but is not there yet. My gut says he may not play in the Vanderbilt game due to the fact that it's a Tuesday game. If it was a Wednesday game, maybe. But I'm not the medical staff, so we will keep an eye on what happens as it relates to the availability reports. The most recent availability report prior to him being out for this game was that he was questionable, right? So if we move from questionable to probable, then we probably have a very good chance that he plays. But as of this moment, it looks like Darion Reed is going to be out for maybe another game. And so we will probably be playing shorthanded for another game. So that is the only other thing I will mention as it relates to this game from an Alabama standpoint is that, we were without Darion Reed, and he's somebody that I think definitely could have contributed in this game. Personally, I think that a guy like Latrell Wrightsell was missed a little bit more in this game just due to the three-point shooting and how well he plays in the flow, especially with a fast-paced game like Kentucky with the guards that they have. But obviously Alabama is able to go in to Rupp Arena and win even shorthanded and get the win, right? So it's exactly what you want to see. Awesome to see. just really, really great. Ole Miss actually does drop a game to Mississippi State, so now Alabama's back tied kind of for second in the conference. But, we kind of survive in advance and move on to the next game. And speaking of the next game that Alabama is going to be playing is in Coleman Coliseum at 6 o'clock on Tuesday, and it is against the Vanderbilt Commodores. And the Commodores are coached under Mark Byington. Mark Byington previously at Georgia Southern, then at James Madison the last few years. Took James Madison to the second round of March Madness last year before being hired by Vanderbilt. He has done a lot to the Vanderbilt team and has kind of completely changed around their trajectory from what they were under under Jerry Stackhouse. They are a much different team, a much better defensive team than they were, and it really feels like they're playing as a unit, right? The problem that I kind of felt when you looked at some of the teams under Stackhouse is they had really good individual players, but as a team, sometimes they were not playing fully as a unit. I think that's the thing that Vanderbilt does the best currently is that, he's more modernized their offense, right? So they are a team that's going to be playing a little faster. They're going to be taking a few more threes. They're going to be, he likes to say that he has a lot of point guards on the floor. He wants guys that can pass, dribble, and shoot. And it's much more of that style of basketball. And I think that Byington has done a lot for Vanderbilt basketball. This season, they currently sit at 15-3, 3-2 in conference. They have wins over Nevada, TCU, LSU, South Carolina, and most recently Tennessee. Are some top 100 wins that they have. Their only losses this season are Drake, Mississippi State, and Missouri. None of those bad losses by any stretch of the imagination. Drake was in their MTE championship. Mississippi State and Missouri, obviously, in the SEC. Mississippi State, they did drop at home, and then Missouri was on the road, right? So this is a team that has a couple of wins, or has a win on the road in conference. They also won at Virginia Tech in the SEC-ACC Challenge. So they do have a couple of wins on the road, but this is a team that has not been on the road a ton, right? So if you're looking at something that maybe Vanderbilt lacks, and they have not been on the road a ton in super hostile places to play against really good opponents. Their away game against Virginia Tech currently sits at 171 in KenPom, right? They're worse than any team in the SEC from a analytics perspective. Their other away win was against LSU, that's currently 69th in KenPom. Again, another team that's not great from a perspective of how good they are in terms of SEC, right? They're one of the lower ranked SEC teams in the conference. So Alabama will be the toughest road environment they will have played in. They did drop that game at Missouri that I mentioned. That was their previous toughest place that they had played. They lost that game by 9. And I do think that this is a game that Alabama should be able to win, right? But similar to that Ole Miss game, Alabama should have been able to beat Ole Miss, right? This is going to be a situation where Alabama still has to play their game, right? Is Alabama the better team? Yes, right? I think Alabama is clearly the better team than Vanderbilt in this game. I think Alabama should be able to win the game, all things being equal. But the question becomes, is Alabama going to be able to understand that the win over Kentucky comes because you played hard, you played your style of basketball, you were aggressive on offense and on defense, you rebounded the ball, and you played Alabama basketball, right? The reason you won the game is you played your game, right? Not because, we're just better than the other team. Because it felt like in the Ole Miss game, we felt like we were we're just better, and we didn't give it the effort that it required on the rebounding side, on the offensive side, even to a degree on the defensive side. Obviously, defense was not the problem in that game. It was much more of an offensive issue. But that is really what it felt like the problem was in that game, is that Alabama kind of just did not take Ole Miss as seriously as they should have, right? That's the thing that you need to look at in this Vanderbilt game. And I think that you'll be able to know very quickly how Alabama's going to do in this game based on, right, in the Ole Miss game, the game starts with like 5 straight turnovers. after those 5 straight turnovers, Alabama just never seemed to fully get in rhythm, right? Alabama never seemed to fully realize, hey, Ole Miss is prepared for this game, right? Ole Miss is a team that's able to get steals. They're able to understand your passing lanes. They're able to, if you're not quick with the basketball, if you're not paying attention to where you're passing, they are going to create turnovers. They are going to create steals, and they're going to stymie your offense, right? That is what it became very clear of at the beginning of that game, that it really felt like Alabama never got full grasp of, right? It never felt like Alabama understood the level in which Ole Miss was ready from a defensive perspective, right? Ole Miss was able and ready to jump in passing lanes, to create steals, to create the ball pressure, and it never felt like Alabama adjusted to that, right? That's something that, in theory, Alabama could have known coming into that game, and I'm sure that Nate and staff had talked about it. But if you're to ask Nate, he really felt like he didn't get the team prepared quite enough, for what Ole Miss was going to be doing, and he put some of that on himself. I would expect that Alabama is going to be prepared for this Vanderbilt game, right? They're going to be able to look at that Ole Miss game and say, hey, this is what Vanderbilt is doing, right? I would fully expect Vanderbilt to switch a lot. If you look at Vanderbilt's size, they are not a very big team. Overall, they're actually 305th in Division I in height. From a perspective, their 2 main centers that they run out there are Jalen Carey at 6'8" and Devin McLaughlin at 6'7". They don't have a current guy on the team listed at over 6'8". This is just not a huge team. But sometimes you have to understand that because it's not a huge team, they're going to be able to be a little bit quicker. They're going to be underneath you a little bit more. They're going to try to create steals, right? And that's what they have done this season. They're currently 7th in the country in steals. They're 8th in the country in causing turnovers from a defensive perspective. And they're just a team that does a good job at creating steals and turnovers. Tyler Tanner and Chris Mannon are both top 10 in the country in steal percentage, right? 2nd and 7th, respectively. Tanner also is 2nd in the country at not turning the ball over himself, right? McLaughlin is a top 20 offensive rebounder, right? They have some guys that are nationally ranked in a few different categories. And so what you don't want to see the team do is see that, oh, you're just playing Vanderbilt. Because sometimes, your mindset is, oh, we're just playing Vanderbilt, not a big deal, right? And at the end of the day, this is not the Vanderbilt team that you're accustomed to seeing, right? This is going to be a better team and a different team that you're accustomed to seeing in years past. Obviously, with their win over Tennessee, you can point to that and say, hey, look, Tennessee just went in there. Tennessee's obviously a very good team. Tennessee drops a game to them. So, you're able to point to that. But it's also, I think that Alabama just needs to play their game. Alabama just needs to do what they know that they can do. And I think that Alabama should be able to win this game. Vanderbilt is not the best rebounding team. They're not terrible, but they're not the best. So I do think that if Alabama rebounds to our potential, I think that's a place that Alabama should be able to have some success. Vanderbilt is not the best three-point shooting team. They're, around Alabama in around a 32.5% team. I think that Alabama should be able to have some success as it relates to, running teams off the line. I do think this game also gets up in the possessions. That is something that Vanderbilt likes to do, but obviously we know Alabama loves to do it. Alabama currently actually sits at number 1 in the country in tempo. So I do think that that's another thing that to Alabama's advantage. I think that Alabama can get out and move and get out and run in this game. So I would expect a guy like an Aiden Holloway to really be important in this game because of how well he can push the pace, how well he's able to shoot the three, how well he's able to take care of the basketball when there's ball pressure on the main lead guard, right? So I think those are some things that I would expect to see. I also do think a guy like Jaron Stevenson is somebody who you would expect to have a fairly large role in this game, just due to his athleticism and being a more small ball 4 or 5, right? Similar to Mohamed Diabate. Again, I would expect him to be a larger role in this game, again, due to the fact that they're smaller at the 4 and 5. I do think that it wouldn't shock me if Cliff maybe doesn't play quite as much in this game, right? I do think that obviously he's going to play because Alabama is really, really good, and Cliff is a great rim protector, and so Alabama is really good at being able to, they've been incorporating him into the offense a little more, throwing lobs and such. So I do think that I expect him to have a role in this game, of course, but I do think that due to the size and how quick I do think this game is going to get, it would not surprise me if Cliff maybe isn't in the game quite as much, just due to the fact that I think that, like I said, I would expect this game is going to get out and running pretty often. I would definitely expect to see a heavy dose of Chris Youngblood, a heavy dose of Mark Sears, a heavy dose of Aiden and LeBaron, right? If Darion Reed is able to play, I would obviously expect to see him a good bit in this one. But obviously, because of how fast-paced this one is and such, you want to just sit Darion and let him get fully healthy. So, we will see how that ends up shaking out. I'm not sure if he ends up playing in this game or not. My expectation would actually probably be no, due to the fact that he didn't play on Saturday and it's a Tuesday midweek. If it was a Wednesday midweek, maybe, but I do think with a Tuesday midweek, it would kind of shock me if he played. Maybe, have him ready for Saturday against LSU. So that's kind of my thoughts as it relates to the game. From a prediction standpoint, I think that Alabama understands what went wrong against Ole Miss. And I think that the leaders of Alabama are going to understand, hey, at the end of the day, if you're going to compete for the SEC title, you can't drop a game at home, right? I don't care if you think that the other team is playing a better game or what. You just have to find a way to win the game at home. I think the team is going to understand that Ole Miss, was able to take advantage of us when we were careless with the basketball. And as I mentioned earlier, Vanderbilt is the only team in conference that's actually better than Ole Miss at taking away the basketball from a steals and turnovers on defense perspective, right? So I think Nate and staff are going to be able to point to that and say, hey, look how careless you were with the basketball. Look what happened and how much it stymied your offense. Vanderbilt can do that same thing, right? They're going to be able to point to that. They're going to be able to point to the win that Vanderbilt just had against Tennessee and say, hey, look, Tennessee did not take Vanderbilt seriously. Tennessee loses the game. Vanderbilt wins. Obviously it's really tough to win on the road, but obviously Vandy wins at their home, defends their home court, and is able to take down Tennessee, right? But the big thing is that a win at home is not guaranteed, right? We saw that against Ole Miss. Just because you're at home does not mean you're immediately going to win in conference, and I think that's something that the team has to understand. I think that after the loss last week, I think they are going to understand that. I think that they're going to realize Nate's going to talk to them about, hey, if we plan on trying to win the conference, you have to defend your home court, right? First and foremost, you have to defend your home court, right? We kind of can feel like we stole one against Texas A&M and Kentucky, right? You won some big games on the road, but at the end of the day, if you're going to compete for the conference, you have to defend your home court, right? So I do think that Alabama is going to understand that and do that in this game. I think that Alabama does win this game by somewhere of 10 to 14 points. I'm going to predict Alabama wins 92-78. I do think that Alabama is able to play fast in this game. I think the possessions in this one are going to get up again to the 74-75 range, partially due to, I think, Vandy is going to try to keep the tempo up as well. I think that Alabama is going to do a really good job at taking care of the basketball and understanding what it takes to win. I do think, like I said, I do think that Alabama wins this game. And if you are in attendance of this one, please be careful. I have a feeling it's going to be really cold outside. So if you are coming to Tuscaloosa for this one, please be careful and let's see what happens. But if you are interested in this content, please subscribe to the channel, like the podcast. There will be a breakdown episode that's going to come out on Thursday. I'll record that Wednesday to come out on Thursday, breaking down the Vanderbilt game as well as previewing the LSU game. It's going to be happening on Saturday. So we've kind of got our schedule evened out as to what it's going to be here moving forward. So if you do enjoy the content, please subscribe to the channel, like, comment, review. I do appreciate all of it. If you have any questions, throw them down in the bottom. I do read everything and reply to as many as I can. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.